In November 1990, the fishing vessel Antares sank in the Firth of Clyde, sadly with the loss of 4 lives. The loss of this vessel was immensely controversial, as it emerged that its nets had become tangled with a Royal Navy nuclear submarine that had passed underneath. This incident led to major changes in how the Royal Navy carries out its training, especially where civilian vessels are likely to be present. Hey and welcome back. Regular viewers will know that I grew up in the West Highlands of Scotland in the lovely town of Campbelltown, right next door to Machrihanish, Britain's Area 51. But the area has another military claim to fame, and that is the Clyde Estuary is the mouth of all British and American returning nuclear submarines back to Holyloch and Faslane. This beautiful part of Scotland is an ideal place to hide nuclear submarines, with deep water and long, dark sea lochs. And that silent service took the lives of people I went to school with. I attended Campbelltown Grammar School, where many of my fellow pupils in the 1970s came from fishing families. This is the picturesque harbour at Carradale, where fishing vessel Antares was based. The fishing vessel Antares was a small trawler built in Sandhaven, Aberdeenshire in the 1960s. It was about 50 foot long and had a gross tonnage of 34 tons, made mainly from wood. Although it could carry out a number of different types of commercial fishing, it was used in the midwaters to catch herring and mackerel. The Antares left Carradale, its home port, on the 19th of November 1990 to fish in the Clyde. Little did they know that another vessel was approaching their fishing grounds. That other vessel was the Royal Navy submarine HMS Trenchant. A hunter-killer submarine, Trenchant was built in Barrow-in-Furness and commissioned in 1989, making it the 5th of 7 Trafalgar-class submarines completed for the Royal Navy. These submarines are 85 meters long, displace about 5,300 tons, and have a crew of 130, and are powered by a nuclear reactor, meaning their range is unlimited, while actually limited by the amount of food they can carry and any essential maintenance required. At the time of the incident, Trafalgar-class submarines were armed with Spearfish heavyweight torpedoes, although the submarines are now armed with Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles as well. HMS Trenchant was in the Firth of Clyde, and it was taking part in the Submarine Command Course. This course is more commonly known as the Perisher. This arduous course is designed for officers looking to eventually take command of their own submarine, and is known as the Perisher due to its extremely demanding nature and low success rate. It takes the form of a 16-week course which includes land-based training, simulator work, and simulated warfighting. During the Perisher course, the officers being assessed are referred to just as students, and the commanding officers are known as teachers. The Perisher course culminates in each student taking command of a submarine during a simulated war scenario, which they are given tasks to complete while being hunted by other Royal Navy vessels in a mock battle situation. Any student failing the Perisher course is immediately removed by helicopter from the submarine, and incredibly, due to the amount of taxpayers' money spent on them so far, cannot serve aboard a submarine for the rest of their career. The perisher course is world renowned, and navies from all over the world send crews to take part in perisher training. Timeline of the incident. The Antares had been fishing in the Clyde for several days and had been returning to port in Largs each day to unload her catch. On the 21st of November, the crew decided to head to a deep water area known as the Arran Trench and began a long period of fishing which would continue overnight. Two other fishing vessels, the Heroine and the Hercules III, were also fishing around the same area. The captain of the Antares made a telephone call to his wife at approximately 22:30 and reported that everything was fine. That was the last known communication with the fishing vessel Antares. On the same night, HMS Trenchant was in the same area conducting a perisher course. As this was the final stage of the course, a student was in command of the vessel under the supervision of their commanding officer. The student was required to carry out a simulated mine laying operation while a Royal Navy Leander-class frigate, in this case HMS Charbids, hunted for the submarine on the surface. In the middle of the night at 02:17, the sonar of HMS Trenchant suddenly detected a vessel on the surface and turned to avoid the contact. Loud banging was heard by the crew of the submarine, followed by further unusual noises. The submarine reached periscope depth and assessed the situation, but seeing only the two fishing vessels, the Heroine and the Hercules III, which did not appear to be in any distress, HMS Trenchant surfaced and did find the remains of a trawl net around its hull. HMS Trenchant then attempted to radio the two fishing vessels which they could see nearby. Although radio contact could not be made with the trawlers, they appeared to be engaged in normal fishing activity. The crew of the HMS Trenchant assumed that they had collided with the trawl nets of one of the fishing vessels they could see, but since no harm appeared to be done, they radioed their base in Faslane to tell them of the incident and say it was okay. Not to waste the rest of the night, Trenchant dived and continued its perisher course. Between 8 a.m. and 9 that morning, concern began to mount that the incident may have been more serious than the crew of Trenchant realized. On hearing that the submarine had collided with trawler nets, the secretary of the Clyde Fishermen's Association began phoning around ports and contacting trawlers. The crew of the Heroine and the Hercules informed them that they'd both lost visual contact with the Antares, but assumed that it had left the area and returned to port. When it was eventually established that the Antares had not returned to port, a full-scale search took place. The only evidence of the Antares were fish boxes and oil floating on the surface of the Clyde. However, the following day, the sonar of one of the search vessels picked up a new, uncharted wreck on the seabed. This was quickly confirmed to be fishing vessel Antares. In the following days, the wreck was raised to the surface and the bodies of 3 of the crew members were removed. It took sadly over a year to find Antares' 4th crew member, kid I went to school with. As there were no survivors from the Antares, the series of events which led to the sinking of the vessel have had to be worked out through examinations of the wreck and reports from HMS Trenchant submarine. What is clear is that the Antares was engaged in fishing. The nets of the Antares were approximately 30 meters wide by 100 meters long, and they were fishing in the deep Arran Trench. HMS Trenchant had picked up contact on its sonar and had changed course, but this caused it to collide with the nets of the Antares. When a massive submarine gets entangled with fishing boats' nets, what happens is it can drag the whole fishing boat woof, underwater suddenly as it pulls it down. The official report into the investigation stated that the banging noises heard by the crew were the initial contact between the submarine and the net, and the secondary strange noises were likely to be the Antares hitting the seabed. The official investigation into the incident was published 2 years after the events. It found that no blame could be attached to the crew of the Antares. They were going about their legal, normal fishing business. Instead, all the blame was placed on the commanding officers of HMS Trenchant. The official findings of the investigation were that there was a partial breakdown in both the standards and structure of watchkeeping on board the Trenchant. The following issues were highlighted in the report. Royal Navy rules in force at the time stated that submarines should remain at least 2,000 yards away from commercial fishing vessels. HMS Trenchant failed to do that. The crew of HMS Trenchant believed that their 60-meter depth made them clear of all surface vessels and trawl nets. They were unaware that the depth of the Arran Trench area meant that fishing vessels would set their nets at a greater depth. A critical mistake was made when the crew of Trenchant mistook the Antares and Heroine for a single vessel on the sonar. This meant that after the collision with Antares, HMS Trenchant surfaced and observed the Heroine, engaged in its normal fishing. Thinking this was the only fishing vessel in the area, the crew believed nothing was amiss. They also criticised that following the accident, HMS Trenchant should not have reported to Faslane submarine base that the fishing vessels involved in the incident were safe. This led to an 8-hour delay in launching any search operations for a possible sunken fishing vessel, and of course the loss of life. In the end, these recommendations have had a significant impact on the British government and the Royal Navy's procedures for submariner training and operations. I remember back in the mid-90s that pingers were fitted to inshore fishing vessels' nets, so the submarines could work out where they were. But that only lasted a few years. They were impractical, broke, and maybe they weren't listening, I don't know. But the pingers weren't the answer. In the end, these stringent new regulations came into place. Fishing vessels are now warned in advance of any training exercise which might take place in their fishing area. Very importantly, a spotting vessel is now used, a helicopter, an aircraft, a ship, to clear the area of any conflicting commercial fishing vessels. And foreign submarines operating in British waters, remember the Clyde has Royal Navy and NATO American submarines, must abide by all these same rules. I continue to be very saddened that I lost school classmates in this stupid accident. Imagine the terror of being dragged backwards and down into the sea by one of your own country's submarines. I hope it doesn't happen again. Sadly, there have been further incidents. The truth is out there.